The strategy we are looking at proposes a single, unified, and practical framework for the 2027 election. And we say at the center is a stronger civil society institutional role, working with state-level platforms and specialist partners to coordinate independent citizen engagement. Now, the strategy recognizes that political parties are an important component of a formula that guarantees competitive election and needs support to become better organized, more inclusive, more policy-driven, and more law-abiding. Again, so there is this, in 23 election cycle, not much attention was paid on political parties. For example, anybody who looked at the results and what happened, discover, I talked to some experts, people like Ezenwa, Clem Wanko, others, and what you get to hear is that even the parties, only APC had up to 80-90% agents availability. Not even the PDP. APC probably had 100%. No other party got up to 70 or thereabout. Parties like Labour Party probably would have like 30% or less.
And sharing my personal experience, because I think a lot of Nigerians are youths, maybe the 50s, the 60s below. We were very passionate about the election of 2023. And we, beyond casting our votes, we stayed back to monitor the counts. I could remember that shortly after that, I even contested another election at my child's Parents Teachers Association, where we were being mimicked. It was then Yoruba versus Igbo. They were now calling us LP 77, LP 7, you know, all of this. But again, there was something strong I observed, like you have just identified. We began to worry, we electorates, that this fellow that indicated he was the agent for LP, we have always known within, you know, because this is a grassroots constituency, whatever, your small units, streets, we know ourselves. We know the roles we've been playing the years before. The fellow who indicated that he was the agent representing LP was a known self-acclaimed APC party. So it means that the political parties did not do their job. They didn't have agents. And elections will fail if you don't even have anyone representing you. For those who understand elections and how it runs, your agents, even if it's at SUG level, at any point, your agents have a great role to play. They are your direct eyes on the field. So if you don't have your agent, or your agent is not credible, or is somebody that can be bought over, because it's also another thing, after the casting of votes, a copy will be handed over to the agent. If your agent is somebody that can be compromised, between the point where the election, the vote was cast, and the collation center, your agent is compromised and he swaps what was handed over to him with another thing that had been pre-written, then there is no election. And that is why, if we don't checkmate all of this, we will just continue to go around the circle. There is no election in Nigeria. Agents have a great role to play. All the contestants cannot afford not to play a role in seeing that you get a credible agent to represent you. If you do not have a credible agent, then there is no election for you.
It's important, a smart and effective management of political parties, especially opposition parties in the election process, better guarantees credible outcome. So we argue that a unified strategic effort to promote free and fair election must include support for political parties to effectively demand fairness and accountability from institutions that manage different aspects of elections. But that support, however, must never compromise independent citizen observation or no partisan civil society advocates. So the point here is, you know, our interest is that a free and fair election is more important than who wins election. Because Nigeria is at the point where if you miss this electoral cycle, you may not predict what happened. And it's not about who wins. That's the mistake people make. It's about the process. So to do that well, competitive election requires that opposition also has capacity, not that they must win, but to demand fair regulation. So we now discussed, shouldn't we be interested in strengthening that capacity of opposition parties to demand and receive fairness from the electoral system? Because without being partisan, so you are not non-partisan, independent, but civil society will now say, we care about competitive election. And competitive election means, like you said, if all the parties have their agents, you further reduce manipulation. In 2023 election, even those who went to court didn't have results. It doesn't mean they didn't win or they won, but they didn't even have their own results to prove that they won. And the Electoral Act is premised on the fact that every candidate will have agents who will give you. That's why I said the results should be given to all agents, signed as a check for institutional manipulation. But if you don't have the agents, I don't have the results. So that's why we are thinking about doing that. And so this strategy document is also informed by the, again, it's built around two interlinked commitments. The first commitment, I don't even think I need it. The first commitment is a commitment to protect the integrity of votes. What that means that votes should be freely cast, accurately counted, transparently transmitted, lawfully collected, and faithfully reflected in the declared result. So first commitment is free and fair votes. But beyond votes, we also care about improving the democratic environment in which these votes are cast. Which means today, people are alleged persecution, maybe arrests of politicians and others. So two issues are involved. One is voting. Second is the environment in which voting happens. We need to have democratic environment. We need to ensure that political parties can freely campaign. Very soon, we're going to see a lot of restrictive regulations. Oftentimes, some state governments will say you have to pay 100 million before you put poster, billboards in our various platforms. How does that contribute to free and fair election? Because if there's no free environment for political campaign, then clearly you cannot say that's free. So we're not just looking at the votes counted, collected accurately, we're also looking at the environment in which that happens. And looking at violence and less dependence on inducement, the quality of primaries, that citizens should have access to reliable information, both from INEC, from every institution, and women, young people, persons with disability, and communities that are affected by insecurity should be able to participate meaningfully. One of the discussions will be around IDPs and places like Northeast, Northwest, where Southeast has kind of calmed down a bit. Same place like Olu, perhaps, I don't know. But there are many places in this country where, because of their insecurity status, people might be denied the right to vote. So this is part of what the strategy is focused on. Again, we said that the strategy is informed by outcome of civil society, INEC dialogue on preparation for election. So we identified a couple of concrete readiness issues that require civil society follow-up. One of them is public communication and public trust. We think that that's an issue. Election funding is an issue. Voter registration, happily INEC has extended some. People are asking for more extension. BVAS and IReV assurance. We're looking at decentralized logistics, vote buying prevention, security risk mapping, and inclusive participation. So in this document, we translate these issues into advocacy priority, monitoring questions, institutional engagement milestones, and accountability indicators. So the overall approach is to identify risks and vulnerability based on the history of election management, articulate mitigation and avoidance strategy, and marshal out coherent actions that need to be taken to overcome the pathologies of election in Nigeria. So our overall objective is to build a collective action that is institutional, coherent, and efficient to address the risks, threats, and vulnerability that, unchecked, could compromise the credibility and fairness of the election. Okay, so this is basically set out the objectives, what we hope to achieve. The document starts with a background of, and the background basically says that Nigeria has made progress. We now have regular elections. At least since 1999, we've not missed 1 second. So those of us who are critics acknowledge that from a Nigerian perspective, it's some progress that we now hold elections. Secondly, in 2015, we saw the first time that a ruling party was defeated. So we count it as a milestone. We have seen improvement in technology. Many people forget that we started with card reader. It was malfunctioning, a lot of problem. We moved to BVAS, which has guaranteed significant improvement. Today, accreditation is clear, which has had problem. So Nigeria also have a lot of human rights groups, civil society groups, women network, youth organizations, disability rights. We've seen improvement in the last 23 electoral law. Prof, come on, still. Increased the capacity of people with disability to access elections. So all this we have seen improvement. Now the establishment of civil society situation rule is aimed at solving some of the problems with electoral malpractices and so on and so forth. Inefficient and ineffective coordination of monitoring election and post-election matter. Now the task ahead is not to build a new parallel structure to perform the task of coordination, but to strengthen situational rules so that it can better coordinate, convene, share information, and support collective action while respecting the identity and independence of participating organizations. But beyond election monitoring, there's need to undertake strategic analysis of the risk and threats to free and fair election. So this challenge requires a different kind of platform. And the idea is that those of us who are collaborating in this platform are not building a new civil society coalition of electoral reform. No. Our objective is to bring together analysts, election experts, and community activists to rethink the structure and landscape of election in Nigeria and offer ideas and insights and purposes and insights about goals, actions that will overcome those problems. So our idea is not to build a parallel platform, no. The idea is to bring all of us analysts together, periodically identify problem, provide solution. So the goal and the purpose in the document, I will leave that. The goal is to ensure that we achieve a free and fair election that will help us further stabilize democracy. Like I said, this is not about who wins. It doesn't matter who wins actually in the long term. It matters that elections are free and fair and that democracy survives. Now, this strategy has 8 objectives. We set it out. We say, first, to strengthen the institutional capacity and nationwide reach of civil society situational rule. 2, to improve independent citizen monitoring from the pre-election period through co-election and post-election accountability. Now, we talk about independent citizen monitoring. One of the problems is that we have built an elitist civil society election platform, and we forget that there are community organizations that are effective at the grassroots, but they're not civil society per se. So the idea is, how do we energize those platforms to be active, monitor from pre-election, collection, and post-election accountability. Again, we want to promote transparency and reliability in election technology. This is very important. And part of what we are saying is that we want to have a system where we will test and push INEC. By the way, since INEC finished 2023 election, INEC has not provided an official public explanation for what happened. So I'm even surprised with the political parties. By now, the parties should have demanded an independent verification and certification of INEC's technology processes. Technology is something that can be rigged. Technology is something that you need to get people, independent experts, examine that technology. There's a voter now who says the data was reviewed to other person. Is that not so? Now, if somebody can get access to a voter's vital data, non-authorized person, a third party, it suggests a high level of possible compromise of that system. Not for A or B, but so you can't run an election where you're assuming that the technology platform you're going to use, and you are not testing it to independent analysis. So that's part of what we are looking at. Now, so the approach is, like I said, is non-partisan. Again, you see, Nigerians make a mistake. Political engagement does not mean partisan engagement. And that's why different groups, women groups, church groups, everybody should be politically engaged. Partisanship is different. So our strategy is not partisan. We believe in citizen observers, not only NGOs, but citizens should be to be trained to better protect, electoral outcome. We talk about political party capacity building. Should be available on fair and transparent terms to interested parties. So we should be able to train political parties on fair and transparent terms, meaning we say we are doing a capacity training on election monitoring. All parties are invited. Today we didn't invite parties because we said these are in-house discussion, but we are going to invite the political parties. Now it will be open to all. If they don't send their people, then we cannot accuse us of being partisan. So this group wants to focus on building the capacity of political parties and inclusion, lawful campaign conduct, what we teach them, polling agent preparation, and an internal organizational system. This will not be partisan. Again, our activities will be guided by evidence, verification, and restraint in public communication. Our report should be based on standard tools, documented incidents, and reasonable quality control. The public hearing we are trying to do, with the citizen public hearing, will be conducted in a manner that all those who participate in the election of 2023 and those impacted by the election at the civil will come together, give evidence of what they know went wrong and how it affected them. Now, part of the thing we do in this country, there's no accountability. There are people who didn't vote. There are people who were excluded. Those people will be in the room to tell their story. And the idea is that it will offer us an opportunity to hear the voice of such marginalized constituencies. And of course, inclusion will be treated as a core issue. Now, the key issue here is how do we strengthen civil society situation room? Because it remains a principal platform for coordinating civil society election for 2023 election. And our idea is that it should provide a space where organizations can plan together, share information, agree on minimum standard, and issue joint positions. So we see in the past where different groups issue different positions, sometimes undercutting that. So we want to see how we can create a joint platform so that when you say this is a position of this election or should election, all civil society groups through the session room will issue it as a joint so there's no conflict. It improves the, we will suggest to them that you have to look at the governance structure of the civil society session room, look at the secretariat membership and operating procedure. The governance structure should be clear enough to inspire confidence among those who are participating and flexible to align time decision during election period. Of course, membership criteria, secretariat is already on. They should have a small but capable technical secretariat. Civil society situation rooms in every state in the country and FCT, so that you should create, in all the states, they have their own civil society situation room, not just at the national, because elections are manipulated at the lower level. That's where credible protection for election happens. So if, for example, you sit in Abuja association room managing election that happened in Sokoto or Ekiti, it would be better to have that platform in Sokoto and then aggregate information for you and take it to national. Of course, there will be coordination and so on. So basically, we want to, we see the social room, they should maintain a civil society INEC readiness tracker. Now this tracker will record INEC's commitment, follow-up question, requested evidence, responsible institutions, target dates, status and agreed escalation. So what we want is that don't just wait last minute. There should be a tracker that tracks everything INEC is doing, when it's doing, what is missing, election funding, voter register, PVC access, everything should be tracked by a situation room. Now, the second aspect of this work is what we call citizen monitoring and lawful mandate protection. Now, citizen monitoring is one of the most important safeguards for a credible election. It gives the public an organized and non-partisan way to observe whether rules are being followed, report problems, and contribute to a more accurate public record of what took place. For 2027 election, monitoring should cover the entire process: voter registration, voter education, party primary, campaign, logistics, polling unit questions, operations, counting, collection, and result declaration, and post-election accountability. When we talk about mandate protection, it must be understood on lawful and responsible terms. It means protecting the integrity of the vote through documentation, verification, self-preservation of evidence, timely reporting, and recourse to lawful channel. It does not mean fighting at the polling unit. So when we talk about mandate protection, some people, I go to some meeting, they say, we must protect our vote. They think it's about maybe fighting police officers or violence. No, it's about documentation, escalating the, you document, you verify, you preserve evidence, because yes, you can say the courts are corrupt, but the truth is that the quality of evidence we bring to election cases are very poor. If you read elections in the US and see documentation and see briefs, you will see when they say this place was rigged, you will see the evidence, you will see testimony of voters alongside documentary evidence. People who saw, people who were there. So if you don't have that citizen mandate protocol, you will not be able to train people to know that it's not just enough saying, they don't rig them, we saw them. You have to document, you have to be a process to translate it to some people who have responsibility, you have to verify, and you have to escalate and find lawful channels. So that's the point we're looking at. So the monitoring system should include trained and accredited observers, community-based early warning volunteers, citizens reporting channel, legal support desk, and a verification process that separates rumor from evidence. Observation tools should cover opening of polls, accreditation, voting, counting, completion of result form, posting of polling unit result, movement to collection center, conduct of collection and assessing information. And so the notion here is that we have to pay attention to collection centers, because many of the most serious disputes in the Nigeria election arise not from what happened at the polling unit, but from what happened at the collection centers. So it's important that the monitoring plan should include trained personnel at relevant collection centers, clear process for escalation, and careful documentation. Again, if you look at what to get, the issue around IReV and EC8A has been an issue. So we will specifically monitor the chain from when you complete polling unit result form to publication of IReV and collection at ward, local government, state, and national. And again, this is important. Even if IReV is not mandatory in the law, as they say, the law provides for, if it fails, resort to normal incident form. But if you have good election monitoring at the collection centers, you'll be able to reduce the incidence of manipulation. So the truth is that we outsource our lack of diligence to technology. We've seen all over the world that technology needs to be monitored. So what we're trying to do is to bridge that gap, so that we don't always say without technology or except the law expressly. If we knew now, we shouldn't have amended 2022 electoral law. If you knew that we're going to get into this. So it's a lesson. Sometimes the solution is not in laws. Sometimes the solution is in creating a process. One of the things that are difficult for Nigerians to manage is management. We're not good in managing things. We're not good in creating process and building footprints. And so that's one of the things we want to do. This incident will have been properly documented. And don't forget that that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying, no, hold on, let me answer. It's a good point, but no need to finish. Documentation is who came to vote, human beings. If you create election monitoring mandate protection within the voters in that place, there is a responsibility to document. Again, you see, let me tell you, there's no incident that you cannot document. And again, the question of documenting is that, do you know how to document something to be legally admissible and reasonable? Can you now, because INEC has a responsibility, also a power, to void elections in place and redo elections. But the problem is that nobody presents to INEC real evidence submission. You hear it on, maybe Amadi will tweet it. That's not procedure. So part of what this work is about is to create that process in INEC, where INEC can have a process. And this is, you see, INEC has the power to do what we call administrative hearing. You know that very well. Meaning that as election is going on, INEC can take a hearing to determine whether this vote should be cancelled. And what they need to do that hearing is do those evidence. To be fair, our electoral system has been very poor because engagement has been very superficial. Just one example, and I continue. When PDP, or I think it's PDP, last election, when Didino Melaya objected to election collection at the national, at the ICC, and they walked away. If it was the US, that minute, the legal team is bringing re-petition to INEC. It will be a written petition with evidence and force INEC into a hearing. INEC will go into administrative hearing with the commissioners and make a decision. But you see, we don't know about it, no training people. So election is actually like lawfare, it's war on law. Before anybody declares to run election in America, they first put their legal team together. And what that work is not to go to court, tribunal. From day one, they've started the lawyering, the processes, the petitions to the electoral body, step by step. Any new rule, they counter, they appeal, they so that's what I mean by that. Okay, so now technology. I talked about technology. So citizens need to have more accurate information about what BVAS and IReV can and cannot do. What procedure to apply when technology fails, how polling unit results are recorded, and how collection is expected to proceed. Public communication should not create unrealistic expectation, but it should insist on timely, clear, and honest explanation from responsible institutions when problems occur. So the point we're making here is simple. BVAS, IReV, INEC needs to have clarity and say, yes, the law authorizes us to move away from technology transfer. When would that happen? What process creates it? So we reduce the discretion of INEC. INEC has to issue internal rulemaking and say, we're only going to when there is no possibility of electronic transfer. These are the steps we take. This is how it's so that citizens know beforehand and able to now, if INEC does something contra, it becomes a ground for petition. So these are part of the things we want to ensure. So we want to incorporate polling unit and corridor level risk information where it can be shared safely and lawfully. It will strengthen documentation and referral for vote buying, intimidation, and illicit financial activity through evidence-based reporting channels, while recognizing that investigation and enforcement remains the responsibility of authorized agencies. So we want to have structural engagement with INEC, security agencies, EFCC, ICPC, and other bodies. And then, of course, we dealt with misinformation and disinformation. Again, inclusion, voter education, and citizen participation. Of course, we know a lot about that. The only point I emphasize is that we need to focus on increasing access, improving what INEC has done with people with disability. We look for measures tailored for women, entirely displaced persons, and communities affected by insecurity. I spoke a little bit about political parties important because political parties are central to democracy. They recruit leaders, develop policies, select candidates, and mobilize citizens and form government. So we should never leave political parties out of election integrity system. But they are weak in Nigeria. They are very opaque, no primaries. The last primary showed that all the parties don't even have the rapid response to organize themselves. Even APC, that is the most established and has biggest capacity, they couldn't even quickly do their primaries when INEC timeline came. So everybody is affected. So what we want to focus on is, first, internal democracy, credible membership system, inclusive policy, manifesto development, lawful campaign conduct, campaign finance. Abuja School went to court in 2022 to force INEC to develop a robust election campaign finance methodology. We won the case. Up to now, INEC has not done it because, see, we're talking about funds, illegal funds, but there's no rules that make us to spotlight whistleblowers to say, so person, this kingpin gave money to this party. It was spent this way. But when you have a rule that require monthly or quarterly reporting, the parties are required to report all their expenditure, report all income, then you can have a footprint to see discrepancy. You can see, then it's a basis for EFCC or INEC or ICPC or anybody to enter in, and in looking at things, you can find a red flag that can lead to. So today there's a conspiracy. Nobody is dealing with election campaign. Because if you deal with that elephant in the room, you are going to make sure you create more sanity. Election buying is not only voters. How about politicians and billionaires who buy membership form, who buy vacancy positions, office candidacy with big money? So we want to make sure that we build the capacity of political parties. Again, we're engaging with key stakeholders, and the idea here is to help INEC develop restructure that enable accountability and transparency in dealing with political parties. The way INEC deals with political parties, call them to a meeting, IPAC, announce a policy. The one person will speak and thank the commissioner, the chairman for helping us. That's not INEC party relationship. INEC partnership should be like a regulator and a regulated entity. They will tell them the rules they want to make. The parties will go and make submissions. INEC will look at it and come out with a decision. So it shouldn't be like briefing. So we want to strengthen that so that it will further put pressure on INEC to be transparent. Now, the second phase of our work will occur during the main campaign period. Our attention should shift to monitoring campaign finance, hate speech, violence, abuse of incumbency. National Human Rights Commission, we are working with them to develop a 2027 hate speech observatory. Why is it important? Hate speech is the purveyor of violence in election. Hate speech leads to hate crime. So, but the question is, who is monitoring political communication? So we want to monitor and track, and then National Human Rights Commission can issue a rebuttal. Imagine if they say, this candidate is a Fulani herdsman. So the National Human Rights can step in, issue a correction, and track. Because you can't allow people to make statements that are dangerous and go free. There should be accountability. We saw in 2023, nobody monitored, there was no accountability for anything. So the idea here is to say it will further improve the quality of political communication. At the same time, it will help to reduce propensity to violence. So we will be doing that again. We're going to be coordinating and monitoring and improving the quality of learning. The idea here is threefold, and I want to end on this. One, oftentimes, rigged elections are evidence of poor preparation. If we do our work well, we will reduce the incidence of rigging, number one. Number two, we are no longer relying on the integrity of INEC or political parties. We want to assume that they will manipulate the election. Our starting point is, how do we make it difficult for each of these persons to rig election? What processes, procedure will create more transparency and accountability and disable those who have investment in rigging election? And the third is this, that election integrity is no longer a matter of civil society groups in hotel rooms. It now should be made a popular issue owned by the citizens themselves, and utilizing citizens' platform, women group, all groups, to protect vote, track voting to collection, to declaration, and post-election. That the failure of the past is that we romanticize election into election monitoring observer. So we write reports. But now, the process of self-help, let the voters themselves be part of protecting the integrity of their votes. I think that's the, and so what we have done is, if you look at the document, you showed an annexure of CSO, INEC, outcome, integration, and accountability matrix, where we look at priority issues, public trust and communication. We talked about what should be done, lead partner. We talk about evidence and milestone. We talk about result management and collation. We talk about BVAS and IReV assurance, election funding, voter access and PVC, logistic and material security, vote and vote buying, inclusion and gender participation. So what we have done with this document is to create a framework that shows that we should move away from pessimism. Oh, INEC 23 election has been rigged. Therefore, many people have already concluded that the election will be rigged. I believe that every social outcome is a result of dialectics of action and reaction. If people sit back, they will be conquered. If people fight back smartly with good strategy, they will likely win. I believe that the election 23 27 could be free and fair, but it doesn't depend on INEC's good faith. It doesn't depend on what's his name, Professor Oshipi, what's his name? Amupeta, yes. It doesn't depend on him. He may be a good or bad guy, it doesn't matter. It depends on if we build a system that is difficult to be rigged, election will be free and fair. And again, I want to end on this note that our failure is also a result of the poor quality of work we have done. I can tell you for sure that Nigerian political parties have not really worked hard to have free and fair election. They have not. And I give you 3 examples to close. I'm not aware how many times political parties have taken INEC to court, apart from candidates. What they're interested in is being candidates. How many cases have they sued INEC on the basis of what INEC has failed to do that has not to do with who is candidate? So the Nigerian Opposition Party is a party that is cynical about free and fair election. They are more concerned about being candidate because everybody believes that somehow they'll be able to rig their way through. Second, the fact that they don't pay much attention about getting agents who will protect their votes, speak about lack of capacity at the level of party management and structure. And thirdly, and this will be worse because today we now have parties that are created in 2 minutes or 2 hours to election. So they don't even have any even basic party capabilities. Are they able to really develop overnight the capacity to recruit? It's easy, but their mind is not on it. Because many of the party leaders are thinking about money they collect from candidates, bribe they are collecting left, right, center. So these people don't have the capacity. And we feel that democracy is not about the candidates, it's about us. Oftentimes we misplace the focus on those who are running. They're not the main stakeholder. We, the people, ought to protect integrity of election, irrespective of who wins. That's my position, really. That Nigeria needs free and fair election more than Nigeria needs any particular leader at this point. If not fair election, Nigeria will suffer dearly because the level of violence that's already building up is too much. That a rigged election in 2027 could be the trigger for a very devastating outcome for the country. So for me, and for those of us as part of this collaboration, we identify Nigeria election as one of the 4 deadly holes Nigeria is in now. If Nigeria fix election, they can fix poverty, they can fix conflict, they can fix other things. But if Nigeria doesn't fix election, there's no chance they will fix these other things. Because one, you need a basic stable state to develop economy. You need a basic stable state to develop enterprise. So if you look across the country now, everywhere is in rupture. Kidnapping, terrorism, this and that. So we need to have at least 2027, people say, okay, at least we voted, we are happy. Let's see what these guys can do, whoever it is that win. So I'm an apostle of election first, winner second. Fixed election, free and fair election first. Then whoever wins in a free and fair election is good enough. That's what democracy is all about. So again, thank you for this. So we can now have those robust conversation on several issues. The idea again is to have a dialogue. So what I presented as, this is an outcome, don't forget, of series of meetings that we have had, the leaders have had online for about 4 weeks, Action Aid, Center LSD, Andrew, TV, also.
For your insightful presentation, and thank you for bringing us into this conversation. Most times when people have these kinds of conversations, they don't even know the right stakeholders to bring into the room. And I would just like to talk about the work that the Nigeria Civil Society Situation Room does with regard to the electoral process. In these documents, despite the laudable ideas that we see here, I noticed a significant gap in the way the Nigeria Civil Society Situation Room is perceived on the outside. So the Nigeria Civil Society Situation Room, when we talk about coordination, this was the primary reason for its establishment in 2010, just ahead of the 2011 general elections. And over and over and over again, we have tried to make sure that our strategy is in such a way that people speak with one voice. I know there's a lot going on in Nigeria, particularly just before the 2023 elections, and after that, we saw that trust in the process just declined. And most times, people just look for someone to hold accountable. They say, oh, this person is to blame, INEC is to blame. At some point, even civil society organizations, they started being called, these ones are INEC CSOs and all that, just anything to make sure that someone is held accountable. So I will talk about, just shortly, the leadership of the Nigeria Civil Society Situation Room. So here today, I was supposed to come with the co-convener. The Situation Room has a convener. You've been in talks with Dr. Wike. We have 2 co-conveners. You talked about your conversation with Action Aid. Action Aid is also one of our co-conveners, Celeste Nodo, and Odi. She was supposed to be here, but for an emergency today. I'll just talk about generally what we do and how we try to make sure that we are coordinating our voices to speak as one. We are over 70 organizations, and amongst those organizations, we work across different thematic areas. The strength of the Situation Room is seen in the capability and quality of the organizations on the team. We have several organizations. You talked about mandate protection, political parties. We have members that engage with these stakeholders across these thematic areas. But I'll just like to speak to one issue. When I talked about the perception of the Situation Room, Dr. Sam made mention of something which may not be generally true, which is that during the election, most times the platform is seen as an elitist group. People just go, observe, and all that. But primarily, we deploy observers across the states of the Federation, particularly because of the strength of its members. Our members are spread across these 36 states. What do? We try to make sure that in every state we have a voice speaking for us, geopolitically. So just ahead, we just came back from Oshun, and what did? We tried to make sure we mobilize citizens. Reports are not just gotten from analysts. Yes, during elections, you see analysts in the room speaking to issues, but these issues that are being spoken to are from field observers. So if we go to, I can't speak Yoruba, but we have citizens there who we can train. And I'll just talk about something that is ongoing. We are trying to see how we can also deploy ahead of 2027, which is the Situation Room Electoral Accountability Tracker. What is this trying to do? To make sure that observation is primarily citizen-led, that every citizen across the Federation can report to issues wherever they are. Not just about getting partners who are from other states to come. It's not a national thing. It's a subnational thing where people can mobilize and engage the process at their level. So I hope that this conversation will be ongoing, but particularly I would like to also talk about this issue of credibility ahead of the 2027 general election. So ahead of every general election, we usually release a credibility threshold, for which in the threshold we outline benchmarks for credible elections for every season. And I realized that even from this conversation, you see that significant gap. Citizens don't even know what is being done on their behalf from the outside, because for them it's all about how can we make sure that our votes count. Beyond all the technical language and all of that, people need to know that there are people working behind the scenes. Election observation is not just something that can be done on its own. So when we get reports, it always informs reforms. All the protests that were done earlier this year were championed by the Nigeria Civil Society Association. We are the National Assembly talking about the electronic transmission of votes. Many people didn't really understand that struggle, and I'm sorry I'm taking a bit of time, but it's important that we also understand, what this is all about. I think that, and this is also for the next steps, I saw that in the agenda, that for conversations like this, I would also recommend that the Nigeria Civil Society Situation Steering Committee is also engaged, maybe in another meeting, to understand the strategies we are deploying ahead of the 2027 election and see how we can partner. Right now, we are trying to also make sure that our membership continues to cut across different states, identify the gaps and see that, this is where we need to make our voices stronger. And that's why every election season we engage people, we review memberships, and we say, okay, who are the people trying to join the situation room? How can they apply? How can their work also feed into what we are doing? So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Just a slight response to Prof. And, she made mention of the Abuja election, and we know what happened. And I sit back and I've listened to people say this over and over again, but the truth is, the opposition was very poorly prepared. Wike was several steps ahead. Those who are opposed to us, who don't like us, and I'll just give you a simple example. Wike understood that with the inflation in transportation, in housing, people who lived, for example, in Gwarimpa had moved to Buari, had moved to, they moved further down. Do you understand? And when we say that our government do not keep records, we ourselves do not update our records. We're equally as guilty as the people we are saying we are opposed to. So if I had relocated to Buari, the onus was on me to go and change my voters registration address so that I would not meet there will be no encumberment, there will be nothing stopping me from voting within my area. What Wike did was they have the data. They know how everybody is moving. They're the people at the helm of affairs. So it was just commonsensical. If I was in government and in the opposition, I would have done maybe the same thing. Restrict movement. Most of our people who wanted to vote were banking on the fact that they could visit their shops after voting on Saturday or go to family members. All they did was stop it. No, you can't move. And that's why the votes would seem as if, so how prepared are we? We keep saying, and that's why for almost a year I've taken a hiatus, I've stopped speaking, because in my mind I'm thinking, we know all the wrong. And I was on a Spaces last week, Monday, and I had people saying, Tinubu did this, Tinubu did that, we know all the things he did. Somebody was saying, how can the president say, I'm happy that the opposition is in disarray? I asked the person, if the APC, whom you are opposed to, was in disarray, wouldn't you gloat? Do you understand? What are we doing? I'm tired of the complaints. I love when Dr. Amadi said, it's not as if he's not against certain things that go on. It has come to stay. But what are we doing about it? So it's the value for what you paid for. If you gave me 2,000 naira and promised me road, hell, know that me and my group are going to want you to, yes, you procured a promise. It's time for you to fulfill it. We need to change the narrative and be better prepared. So if you know that your polling unit was in Garki, in Area 11, and you have relocated to Karu because the rent is cheaper in Karu or in Kurudu, then the onus is on you to ensure, and I'm very, very sure in this voters' education, we haven't gotten to this angle, and it will happen again. Once bitten, twice shy. So it's tough. We need to wake up and do things differently. We should stop complaining. I've started to see, I've started to understand what it is that they're doing, and it's a psychological game as well. Let them feel that they can do nothing. Meanwhile, they are very afraid of us because, like I said, they have the data, and they know that those of us who are opposed to them are in the majority. For a simple example, the opposition, how many parties do we have? There's PRP, there's SDP, there's NDC, there's ADC, do you understand? We haven't even taken a leaf from this same person. You don't have to like the person. But if you look what has worked, have we tried it? No, we haven't. I believe that we're going into the polls the very same way we went, and they stole from us. We're doing exactly the same thing, and we're expecting different results. So that's where I stand, and that's just it. We have to be prepared. Yay, thank you.